Right. Looks like some of our participants are not muted. If you can just mute yourself because it just adds some. So, right. So for this summer, again, we will have, you will see that we will have 5 major assignments. First of them will be published today, and you will get the information about that. And I've updated that in instruction plan as well. So first of them you will get today. So there are major 5 assignments, and then we have 5 labs. Now, with respect to lab, if you see this lab 1, which is due by June 3rd, and if you see the previous one, so these are from the previous semester so please don't worry about them. I'll update them once I reach to them. So anyhow, this lab 1 is supposed to be submitted by June 3rd midnight. It means that you have still 2 more days for that. So because this was the first one, so I just kept it open for some more time, so that you get ample time to just complete that one. And you were doing that in your group, if you remember yesterday, and like group of 2. So you can, as I said in the description, that one of you can submit that. Okay, so these will be these 5 labs, 5 labs that we have, right? And then we have what? 5 assignments. So main 5 assignments and 5 labs. Okay, so the labs, I will just let you know which one is the submission for the lab, as I asked you people to submit the lab yesterday. So in the next sessions, I'll just formally call this lab 2, and then you will do that submission, right? So they have, I'll tell you that how much marks they just carry. Then we have assignment 1 to assignment 5. So this assignment 1 to assignment 5, along with lab 1 to lab 5, these will comprising, they will make collectively the the main part of our grade, like again a 30%, right? So I'll show you that how they make for 30%. But for the timing, just to remember that we have got 5 assignments and 5 labs. Then we have one project, for which I've just mentioned project proposals and final project submissions. So that is one another another part of it. And let me just show you, because since right now we have no grades entered, so I can show you safely the grade section as well. If we had some grades inputted, we could not have opened that one. But anyhow, since there are no grades being entered as yet. Okay, so see here, let me just clarify the situation. So you see here, for example, this is Abraham Denny, whatever, so name is there. So the midterm will be of 25%, final exam is again 25%, so this makes it 50%, both of them. Now if you see lab 1, so lab 1 till lab 5, you see all of them are comprising of 1.5 of each, 1.5% of each. That collectively makes it 4.5. And if you talk about the assignments, each assignment will comprise of 4.5 weightage. So it's major, it's a major, major assignment. So this is 4.5, 4.5, 9, and this is 18, and this is, this will make it like 22.5 or whatever, and then you have this 4.5 of this one. So that collectively will make your assignments as equal to like 100%. So you have to keep in mind, again, why I'm just telling you that labs are of not that weightage, but of course that also matters for you. But if you talk about assignments, you have to just go about the assignments, because they carry more of the weightage. Then you talk about the project. So this project will be, again, as I said, I will ask you for the proposals, and once you will submit that will comprise of 6%, 6 of your code, and then the final submission will comprise of 14% of the grade. So this is the position of the grades right now. I just wanted to tell you, because right now we are about to have, I will be just populating this lab 1, of course, your grades. So again, you will get something whatever is from out of 1.5 in that. Then when we reach to our midterm exam, for final exam, we'll have those things. So let me just show you a few things that I've updated, and still it is in update, and I'll let you know that when I'll just complete that, because I'm just looking for some dates and things like that because of some of the happenings. But the main important date that I want to tell you about right now is, first of all, is this this one, like the week 8, starting on July 5, and we will have our exam on July 5, mid exam on July 5. Now having said that, I know that there are few students who are traveling in this week, maybe because this is the student success weeks right after the week. So that would be good if you are traveling during that week, June 28th week. But still, if you are traveling in this July 5th, please contact me. I'll just try to work out something for you, right? I know there are some students, I think someone had emailed me that they might be traveling in this week. But again, rest everyone who are not traveling, of course, we are good to go about that. So we'll have our exam on July 5, that is Monday, right? So again, as I said, if because of very genuine reason, you are, of course, if someone is traveling here to Canada, and I understand that it usually takes 3 to 5 days in settling up, coming back over here. So if you are coming someday with somewhere around over here, just let me know in advance. Please don't take it for granted again. So if you are traveling, of course, you would have planned that. So please let me know before you start traveling so that we can find out, we can work out. Okay. The other thing that I want to tell you is that we are in our week 3 right now. Today will be in our week 3. We'll be discussing few things over here. So today I will be just opening up your assignment 1. And this assignment 1 is a very easy one. It's just like, some practice questions that you have done, more like that. So you will get your assignment 1 and you will get 1 week for that. So you have to submit that on June 8th, right? So I will just update that, like, assignment 1 when I update. So then you will be just submitting that on June 8th. Maybe then June 8th, we will have another assignment open up, that is assignment 2, and it will be due on June 18th for 10 days. It will be open for 10 days. And up to so on. So I've just tried to mention this over here. For example, you have assignment 3, then that would be due on June 28th. So because these are the of major weightage assignments, so I've just marked them over here. So labs, I will just tell you in that class, and again, I'll just prior inform you before even closing that inbox that you have to submit that. Mid exam on July 5, that is important. You have to just keep that in mind as well. That mid exam will be on July 5 for us. And then we have the okay, so it might have 6 assignments over here, which is wrong. I'll have to just change that one. There will be 5 major assignments, no 6 assignments, right? So again, if you find assignment 6 in this right now instruction plan, that is something needing my attention still. I will just try to do that today or by this weekend, right? So any question anyone want to ask? I've just told you that if you are traveling and if you have a very genuine reason and you cannot, like, on that week after our student success week, if you are traveling or something, we can work something out. And if we'll work something out, I'll just let everyone know so that everyone understands what's going on between these things. So any questions thus far? If you have any questions, you can just go through it. Then we'll start our session for today. So far, no questions. Looks like everyone is good to go. Okay. Right. So let's start our today's session, and I'm calling it lecture 4. It's not on. Okay. Where we have to upload the code PF last lab in lab 1. Yes, in lab 1. Yes. So the practice questions or the lab questions or the submission, I called them yesterday. If you remember, I called them submission. Let me just show you what I called them in yesterday's lecture, because that might not be updated on. Yeah, submission for 31, May 31, right? So this is the lab 1 submission for you. Someone is asking about lab 1 submission. So this is the submission for lab 1. And again, it's in a group of 2. You were working with one of the partner, and as I said, one of you will be submitting it, but clearly mention your partner's name in the comment section of your program. That's something very important that you need to mention. Is that clear to everyone? Like someone was privately asking a question, so I've just tried to reply. So this is effectively, like, let me just write it down and I will update this file on server as well. So this will be lab 1 to be submitted, and the time I've given you is June 3rd. So still you have got today and tomorrow and day after as well. No, Manpreet, not the enum questions, and not this question as well. I've just given you this for the practice purpose if you want to do practice, right? So no need to submit that one. All right, so let's start our today's class. And today's class, I have just tried to make few things from the last class. There was few questions, there were few confusions, and I'll just complete them and then we'll talk about, if you have any questions, we'll just talk about them. So let's recap about, we have learned about the data types, conversion, etc. Lots of things. And now we are familiar with the loops like for, while, do while, and for each. I'll talk about this for each and for loop again today. Some people had a, okay. So someone is asking about the format in which we have to submit the lab document. It's a very good question. For the lab sections, for the labs, what you can do is that it's up to you. If you want to submit the project folder, that is good. But again, don't do that for the lab at least. For assignments, you will have your complete project submitted. But for the labs, what you do is that you just, you can take your write your programs, run them, of course. And it would be good if you just take out your code and maybe the screenshots of the output and put that in a Word document and submit it. So no real requirement for a submission for labs. Does that make sense? Someone is privately asking about the format to submit lab. So everyone clear about that? Maybe because this is a good question. Some students asked that yesterday as well. So I'm clearing that. That for lab submission, you can do what? Write the code, run the code. For example, take your code, like, copy your code and put it in Word document. Take your output and paste that in Word document and just submit that Word document for lab purposes. I hope that makes sense. Yes. So someone who asked privately, they are saying yes. So I want to ask everyone, please. This is an important question. Everyone is clear about that? Because you every now and then you just keep on getting these questions. If that is not okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now I'm just getting responses from everyone. Yes, thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you. So now, so the last we have talked about the enum data type, not EM, it's enum data type. So we have talked about that one. So today, what I'm saying, like I'll be doing, interestingly, you might have something, some confusions in the previous topic. So I've just tried to submit everything, collect everything, and today I'll discuss some of the concepts maybe that were not discussed yesterday or that were not clear about that, and something new we will just learn as well. So today we'll talk about some special scenarios with variables, types, and conversion. Because I saw when you people were solving problems, I even myself also found out in some of the rooms, some people were not very clear about the conversions. So I'll talk about the conversions in very much detail today, so that everyone is very clear. So I'll talk about that as well, some special scenarios. Revision of few previous concepts. As I said, not only conversions, there are a few concepts that I would like to review today. And I want everyone to be on the same page, because assignment one, in assignment one, I want everyone to be on the same page. So methods in C#. This is very important, and you might be using these methods in your assignment one as well. So I would be discussing those methods today. And you would appreciate that now you will be able to work in those methods, right? So let's talk about something that, again, as I said, we have already talked about, but I'll be just making more clear things because I got few questions and I want to give answer to everyone, so that everyone, as I said, as I'm saying again and again, that everyone should be on the same page. So conversions, when we talk about the data type conversions, there are two types of conversions, implicit and explicit conversions. When you say implicit conversion, it's something that we say that compiler by itself will convert the data type and display the result. So that is implicit conversion, one way or another. And when we say explicit conversions is different. And how it is different? That you need to explicitly tell what type of data you want to receive. Now, the confusions in the previous topics, as I said, was that there are multiple methods of explicit conversions. What are those methods? How can we use those methods? I'll be just letting all that you people know right now, right? So why we use when, in what situation, and which method will be useful in what situation, that is something we need to take care of, right? So, okay, just hold on a minute. I'm just opening up another Visual Studio, and then, right. So implicit and explicit conversion. So sometimes compiler will do implicit conversions. We don't need to do anything related to that one. So let's create maybe, but why I'm just creating a new project? We can just work on the last one. This was week 3 CS. We can work on that file. Right. So when you say implicit conversion, as I said, compiler automatically doing that, not requiring any explicit effort from you. But if you talk about explicit conversions, compiler explicitly asking you to do something, right? And this is the code that we used yesterday. So let me just make out again. I'll talk about all of them. And first of all, let's make all of them comment and start something new over here. Okay, so this is the get type that we're talking about. This was last classes. Okay, so let me just mark start of Tuesday code, right? So that you know that from this part onward, we were talking about the Tuesday, right? So let's talk about this as I said. So if you see the next slide, I've just mentioned what is the implicit conversion. When the receiving number is bigger data type and no loss of data occurs, also no exceptions happen, means implicit conversion is done. So for example, if you see an example over here, int I is equal to 200 and float f is equal to I. So what we are doing over here. So again, those who are not clear about type conversion, I received the questions. So if integer I is equal to 200, I've just received something, I've just stored something into it, and I've done float f is equal to I. I'm storing this 200 into float. You know, the float data type is something with the points, with the decimal numbers, with their decimal precision. So now this 200 is going into f, and we are printing that. So let's run that, because we want to just run and see that what is going on. So if you say, sorry, now if I just take it integer I equal to, for example, 200, whatever, and float f equal to I, right? And now check that, because I will show you the different options that we have. So now if I print f, right, I want to just type this one or print this one. So you see here, let's run this. Okay, so you see the output, 200 is coming, even though you know the data, the value that you defined was basically what was an integer value, and you have stored that in float, and it has taken that float into it. And then because nothing is getting lost, because I did not have any point or something, nothing has been missing over there, so it has just done the implicit conversion. Hope everyone understand that I don't need to do anything explicit. This is implicit conversion. And why conversion? As I said, that the receiving number is of the bigger, of the bigger data type, the float, it has the capability of storing the point numbers as well. So it is basically doing like that. So if I just convert that thing, for example, I say float f equal to 200.32 f, and we need to write an f with the float, right? And I say int I equal to f, right? So I've just done int I is equal to f. Now you see what happens. You see with this squiggly problem, cannot implicitly convert type float to int. An explicit conversion exists. Are you missing a cast? So again, it's asking us that you have done something wrong. Why? Can anyone answer me? Why did not it give this error in my previous situation? Anyone? Why didn't it give that error in the previous situation? And why it is giving this error in this situation? It is not doing implicit conversion. Can anyone tell me why? Waiting for the response. If someone can come up with a good suggestion. Good. And again, for those people who are relatively new, trying to guess things, or maybe not guess things, I've told you. I think indirectly I've discussed that why does it do the implicit conversion and why does it not do the implicit conversion. Okay, that someone said that because of size. Yes, good. Byte size of float is more, right? Nothing will get truncated in the first. Yes, so these are all the good answers. So the receiving data type, because a float will have some point values that would be, yes, more range of values. So that would be truncated 32f, and compiler by itself will never truncate it. Compiler by itself will just save if nothing is going truncated. I hope everyone is getting that. So it says that there is, the option what it says, that it says that explicit conversion exists. Are you missing a cast? It says maybe you have forgot something. What you have forgot? You forgot to maybe cast that. So now, I need to cast it. So I'll cast it one way. There are multiple ways of that. I can do this casting this way. Int f. Now this error has gone. Now let's see what is the output. Okay, oh no. I have to type the I. I'm just printing the F, So F is of course 32, 332, so it will just always give that. And now I have to run that. Now you see here what happens. Okay. So the point part is truncated from here, but it did not truncate that value by itself. Rather, it asked us to just tell it that what you want to do. Everyone understands that? Why? Because it cannot truncate it by itself. It will have to just ask you that whether you are missing something. Do you want me to convert this f into int? So this is not implicit. What we'll call it? It will be called as explicit conversion. Now it is an explicit conversion. I'm coming to all the cases because there are different cases for that. Everyone understands that? First of all, give me a feedback that if float has to go into the integer, it will ask you that please tell me what I have to do. I need to do something. Now come to the slides. I've used all these scenarios. So implicit conversion happens over here, but not in this case, which we were using. It is not doing the implicit conversion over here, right? So now let's talk. Close that one. I'll come to this one as well. Okay, so console.write, this is basically the option we have. Now you see explicit conversion. See here, the first example I've given over here. We can convert data types by either providing the data type before the variable and use convert class. So someone was not clear about convert class. I'll let you know. So we can convert this something like this, as I have done in my program. If you do something like that, it will say, okay, that's good. It will just take out that one and it will just produce. The problem with this int conversion with this by using this int method is that if, of course, int has a specific range of values, you can just go and find out how many values int can store, and we'll know that. So what is the problem with above? The problem is that if this int value or the float value goes maybe outside of the range of this int, it will start behaving weird. What does that mean? For example, this float value is something like this. Maybe, I don't know, right? Any value that cannot be stored in int. And we are doing this explicit conversion. If I just run this one, I just run this one. You see a negative number, something like that. So unless it has the range of accepting values, for example, unless it is accepting those values, it will just keep on showing those values. So maybe this comes in the range. Still, it is not coming in the range. For example, a number that is coming in integer range, it will show the number. But again, you see that now it is inside the range. So once the number goes out of range, now it starts acting not weird. Actually, what it is doing, it is just giving the lower limit of the number, that how much number can I store, and what is my capacity, and where do I just end. So now it would have end, and it says -214, something like that. It says that the number has gone out of my capacity. But the problem is this is not a normal behavior. In C++, in object-oriented world, in our advanced languages, we don't want something like this. Usually what we want is that if something of that kind is happening, there must be a runtime error. And what do we call runtime error? Those new people, we have talked about those runtime errors, exceptions. So we talk about exceptions, so that it should throw an exception. The problem is that if I use this int method, it will never produce an exception in that way, right? Let's talk about something interesting, and I'll just give you another. So as I said, so if you are using convert.int32 or convert. So there is another class that we can use. And what is that? Convert dot. So to int32. And I'll tell you, some student asked what is the difference between int32 and int. I'll just tell you that as well. I'll just tell you, but let me just do that. If I had used this convert class, this is a convert class. You see, class converts a base data type to another base data type. So it will convert our data type into something else. We are converting it to 2int32. We don't know what is 2int. Like again, right now we are just converting it in 32, right? And I'll tell you that what does that mean just shortly. If we do something like that, what happens? Yes, anyone? Can you tell me what has happened? Of course, we can see the output. I've just mentioned that output in the slides. And an exception has occurred. A runtime error has occurred, and it says exception unhandled. It says there is an exception, there is something wrong has happened, and no one is taking care of that. So we need to take care. And the exception was supposed to be the topic of this week, and I might or might not discuss exception today because I want you to just be very clear about the basis before we go for the first assignment. You are clear about that? So convert class is used for that very purpose. Number one, that if something wrong happens with your data type or data, it will throw an exception. And that, as I said, that is professional, more a more good way of telling people that you are doing something very wrong. Please go ahead and adjust that. And one of the things that I've not discussed as yet, let me tell you, I hope some of you know that we need to do what? We need to do the try catching over here. Again, we have to do the exception handling. That will do, definitely. So we need to handle the exception, whatever is occurring, because it will throw an exception, the convert dot in. Now, any one of you, the question was, what is the difference between int and int32? Can anyone of you please tell me what is the difference between these two, int and int32? Int and int32. Can anyone tell me from those older people, and then the people with some experience, and then I'll tell you that what is the difference between these two. I've basically I've replied to that student who asked, but I want everyone to be aware about that. Yes, anyone? Int and int32. So bear in mind, just remember, I'm not getting any reply, but int is a primitive data type and int32 is a wrapper class. Okay, yes, that's a good answer. Int is a data type, whereas int32 is a method of convert class. Okay, so now yes, so please see here. So if I write convert dot, right, so convert to, for example, so you see convert to int, convert to byte, convert to int32, and invert 32 and 64 and something like that. So yes, please remember, in general, let's talk about in general first of all. This int or int32, more or less, they are basically, more or less they are same. You see that I am defining a variable as int I and converting it to int32, right? And if this is a valid variable, again, a valid range variable, what it does, it's giving me it's okay, it's not giving the right answer, and then why? Because I am using this one. So let me just, oh, okay, just hold on a minute. Okay, okay, I'll just talk about it. So again, first of all, this int and int32, as we say that it's a primitive data type, and this int32 is basically what it is, a wrapper class or a class being defined, or it is basically one of the method of converting the data into what? Into our required form. So it will do what? It will just try to convert our integer into the value, into the required or the destination, the destination variable that we want to use, right? So the first thing, just to remember, the first thing is that convert is used in all those situations where you want to have, like, again, you want to work in that way, because usually we get the exception handling, exceptions in our programs, and we want users to introduce or to show, like, whenever there is something that happens with our code, again, abnormal at the runtime, it has to have what it should always display the exception. Now let's come to move forward. So that's what something I was just talking about. So no implicit conversion of strings into integer. Now interestingly, if we just go about something here, if I say string, whatever name equal to, right, or maybe just call it a number equal to 200, right? So you've defined a string as number. So you see what happens is that it's basically a number, and you know that numbers can be numbers. We cannot, because this is a number, but this is in a string format. So if I want to just use it in a way, for example, if I just want to store that implicit conversion, if I say integer I equal to number, so what it says that it is the string number cannot implicitly convert type string to integer. It cannot implicitly convert that type into integer. So what is happening again? These are the both cases, but never it will just convert a string automatically into an integer. And in the same way as we talked about, if you see here, that we will have to just do what? We will have to use the different method. So as I was talking, that there are different methods of converting those values. So one of the method, if you see here, that we can use this method of converting int into, and the method is the parse method. So we have got two methods. You remember we have talked about try parse yesterday. First of all, let's look at the parse method, and then we'll talk about the type parse as well. So what you need to do is that you have to convert that one by using the data type. This is one of the method. How we can do that, you see here. So what I'll do is that I'll say int dot parse. So this is one method that gives us this facility of converting that number, and we have used that this method before as well. So what it does is that it will take the number and it will convert that number into the integer, and then it can just show that number, right? So if I just print it over here, so what I've done, int I is equal to int dot parse, and the number, just basically convert that and print that over here. Let's run this one and see what it does. So 200, it just displays us the 200 because it has just extracted out the number of it, right? So now, interestingly, if this number is, again, this is string does not contain only numbers, rather it's a non-numeric value. I just mentioned that in the slides as well. So it does it, and it basically does what? If you see here, parse and try parse. So now we have to just look at that what it does if I just store something like that. If I say ABC, now this number is not parsable into integer. Everyone understands that? Why it is not parsable? Because it contains the digits as well as it contains a string or the character variables as well. Now let's run this program and see what happens. Okay, so you see an exception has occurred, a runtime exception. Input string was not in the correct format. You remember we have talked about that, and we were just while we were working in the first few classes, that it will just it says that input string was not in the correct format. Why? Because to be converted into an integer, a variable or the string has to be in the right format. It should not be equal to this one. So it is also producing a runtime error, an exception. And one of the way, as I said, I've been continuously saying, which we have not discussed, one of the way is use the try catch and do that exception handling. But we have another way over here in strings, and the other method that we used, and I want you to just remember that. And what was that? Which is try parse method. It's not try parse, it's try parse. Try parse method. And what is that? Parse throws an exception, as it has done over here. Parse will throw an exception if the number is not in the right format. While, as if you remember, we have talked about the try parse. Try parse returns a bool for success or failure. Now, I hope you will understand the try parse that we've used yesterday. So it will always return a boolean for success or return. It not only it returns the success or failure, rather it also can be used to store the data. Do you people remember? We did that yesterday. Always use try parse if you are unsure about the value, will it be valid or not. So now if you see that if I've used that, it will just throw an exception. So how to avoid that? Now you see, I'll just let you know that how we can just avoid that. So let me just stop this one, and now let's talk about it. For example, first of all, I'm talking about the right string. So if I use this try parse rather than parse, right? So what I'm using is try parse. Now this try parse method will accept two parameters. If you see here, it will accept two parameters: the value that is coming up and the output parameter. And I'll tell you that what that output parameter is doing. So try parse, and here I will say out, and I will say, for example, int I, for example. Let me just do that in the next line, and I'm just defining it 0. And why is that? I'll let you. So int dot try parse number out I. Now what it is doing? See if you see here. So int dot try parse, it will just try to parse this data into the string, into the integer, sorry, into the integer. If it is successful, it will do what? It will successfully store that data and output that data into I, and that data will be stored in I. Otherwise, it will just show you something else. So let's complete that one. You see here, I is equal to 0. It will be just, just run that, and we'll see the difference between the parse and try parse. You see, because it was a 200, of course, it had happened before as well. Now let's change something like that. So I've just introduced few, the strings or the characters in it. You see what is coming over here? What is coming over here? It's 0. Now, why it is 0? You see here, because we have given a default value, or we have just defined I equals to 0. So it will just give us 0 in case where it is not successfully being parsed. Yes, it returns false. And if it is returning false, it means this output of I will not be executed. And so what is this out I? It's basically one of the, this keyword will do what? It will just store if this is successful, it will store the value inside this I. What value? The numbers converted value. Please bear in mind the converted value. So you see here, if I just do that again, because 200 or maybe any value to 2050. So now it's a valid value. What will be in I now? Anyone, what will be in I now? If I run that successfully, what will be in I now? No, it will be 2050. Bear in mind, because yes, what this does is it does not store the bool value here in that, because it is returning the bool value for this one, and that's why I just use another technique. So try parse data out will be doing something like that, and if you want to make it bit more sophisticated, I just mentioned that over here. What you will do something like that. Okay, but why we are storing, where we are storing it after parsing? That's very good question. Can anyone tell me where we are storing after parsing? You are asking about the Boolean value, right? We are not storing that Boolean value anywhere. But what we can do is we can do something like that. Bool success equal to int.tryparse. Right? Now see here. I'm making this program more readable, more, if success. Else. Right line. Please enter a valid string, a valid number, or valid string you can call, whatever, because we are taking input as a string, so something you can just write down. And what we can just do one more thing over here. We say success, right? And the value is, you understand where we are storing? Because what is out keyword? Where else we can use it? Okay, okay, that's a very good question. Where else we can use it? And just hold on for a minute. I'll reply you what is this and how where else we can use it. So now, first of all, if I just run this, you see success, the value is 2050. It's giving me the success. And now if I do something wrong, and I run that one, let's see the output. What is the output? Please enter a valid number or string. First of all, let me know, do you understand how everyone understands this now? Try parse. So try parse returns a Boolean value, and this Boolean value can be used to do something like that. Now, someone has asked about this out parameter or out value. It's a very, very interesting one. I will not be discussing completely over here, but I'll give you a just hint, and I'll tell you maybe in today's or maybe next class. I'll just let you know. It will be used somewhere in methods as well. So I'll let you know in the methods, specifically returning values, in the returning values of the method. You got the point? Someone was asking about the out keyword. Akriti was asking. Akriti got it? That it will be used in the returning methods as well, and I'll let you know. Here what it is doing, just please bear in mind. Here what it is doing, it is parsing the number. If the number is successfully parsed, right, into integer, it will output this I value, like the number into this I. And that is good reason why you see if I do something like that, what is the value of it? And I can just print this value over here. So the default, write down, the I is this one right now. So can anyone tell me what will be the output over here? The I is what? What will be the value of I over here? Anyone? What will be the value of I over here? It's 0, of course. You see the value, the I is 0. And why it is 0? Because now it is not recognized. Everyone understands now triparts? I hope triparts is now should be more clear now rather than yesterday. Some people were in confusion. Right? So right. So now this was triparts, and I'll use the triparts again. And as against to that question who is asked that out is another very, very important thing that we'll discuss today. Confusion in for each. Some students they ask for the confusion in for each. I will just try to discuss this for each again a bit in a different context, because I want you people to understand the array as well. When we don't know how many values are there in a collection, we use for each. So in a for loop, we need to know how many elements are there in a collection. By collection, you understand what does that mean? By collection, right now I'm talking about maybe an array or any collection. We'll talk about a lots of collection in C++, in C#, right? So if we don't know how many elements are there in the collection, we use for each loop. If we know how many elements are there, if you don't know, we will use for each. And please bear in mind, for each is usually used in lots of languages like JavaScript and others, that we use this for each a lot, because this makes our life very easy. You will see shortly that why I'm saying that. I'll just talk about that, and I want you people to understand that. So use according to the situation. Whatever situation you are in, you will be using that particular that particular method over. Arrays first. Now I am only talking to those who are hearing or who will be using arrays for the first time. I need some response so that I know that where I have to go, how much depth I have to go. Otherwise, I'll just have a quick reference to that. But how many of you will be discussing arrays for the first time in any language? You can write a me in the chat window. And again, there is no shame in it again, because you are not expected to have prior experience before that. So is there anyone who has not heard about arrays? Because we'll be just talking about the syntax of array in C#, because we have if you already know, you of course know about that. Now, okay, let's try to do something. I would ask all of you to use the annotate feature. Do you people know the annotate feature of your chat window? Okay, some people say yes, they know. Okay, so take out that annotate feature from your window. Okay, someone says no, I'll let you know. And try to write a definition of array over here, whatever definition. For example, you say that, if I say something like array is a cat. So whatever definition is in your mind, please write down the definition of array over here. Okay, so someone who is saying they don't know, if they go in their options of the meeting options, if you go to your meeting options, view options at the top of your screen, maybe you will find annotate over there. So you will find a very complete toolbar. You getting me? Who was saying no to me, no to my reply? So go to your options of the Windows, ordered collection of values of the sum data type. That's very good. Anyone else? Yes. So Gulshan, you were asking. Gulshan, you understand? If you go to meeting options, view options, you would be there. If you can find in view options in your meeting chat window, like Zoom window. So not chat window, Zoom window, you will find view options where it says you are viewing Noman Atik's screen, right? So if you drop it down, you will say, okay, I'll let you know. So what you can do is that you will have you are viewing screen view. There is a view option, the place where you see that you are viewing Noman Atik's screen. Do you see that, Krupa? The place where you see that you are viewing Noman Atik's screen. Do you see that?
Yes.
Green. And beside that, there is a view options option.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Drop it down.
Yeah.
Do you see annotate feature over there? Annotate.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Click on that, and you find a complete, a toolbar over here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now use the text one and write something. So very good. Some people have written down very nice definitions. Someone says array is a collection of homogeneous or some elements, type elements, such as something like that. Linear data structure. Arrays are used to organize data of the same data type, which can be easily stored. That's good. Collection of values of same data type, basically a data structure. Collection of homogeneous data elements. That's very good. I want everyone to write a definition and try to find out an empty place, by the way. Let me just create an empty place because, you know, okay. Yes, so I've just tried to make it store multiple values in a single item. Okay, now you people have found that. And by the way, you know, you can do a chat like structure over here as well. So, you know, there is a stamp option as well. So what you can do, if you see that there is a stamp option and you take a stamp, and if you feel that some definition is very good, you can just go and create a something like that. I've just tried to create this one. For example, I like this definition, or maybe I like this definition, right? So whatever definition you like, you can use the stamp one as well. And there is a star stamp as well. You can just say that I like to have this definition, or maybe this definition is far more good. You see, you people can also use that one stamp as well. Yes, Rubble, you have used the very good right stamp. Anyhow, thank you very much. That's very good. So thank you very much. Now I would be removing the drawing, right? So I'm informing you that, because, you know, you should not be heartbroken because your all drawings will be uh, deleted. Should I delete everyone? It's now see here. Oh, everything is gone. Okay. So now what happens is that, let's talk about that. Let me just delete that one. Oh, someone has written down after that. So you have cleared that. Thank you very much. Okay, right. So array is a homogeneous data types collecting together, and they occupy contiguous memory or continuous memory allocation. That's an important part of an array. Array has to be of same data type. You know, what is the motivation of array? Let me tell you. Array's motivation is that when you use int I is equal to 10, you can only store one value at a time in this int. We need to have something, we need to have a data type which can store multiple values with the same name. I want to store for example, the ages of all students. So I need to have one array where I can store the ages of all students. The problem is, or the feature of the array is, as you people have mentioned, I want to talk about this a little, then we'll just see. So this is one array. How many elements are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 elements are here. Let's talk about that. So, you know, every element of array, I can just store ages into it. So I can say 20, I can say 19, or I can say 25, I can say 23, whatever values, 19, 21, whatever. So now I've stored multiple values into it. Now what happens is that with one name, I can store multiple values over here. Yes. And so how do I recognize each and every element? What I'll do, every element is recognized with the index value, indices or indexes over here. So first index is always what? 0. Second index is always what? 1, of course, and 2 and 3 and 4 index value. Yes, exactly. So now we have got 6 elements over here, and we can talk about any number of values. What I want you to recognize now, if I say, for example, what is the age of the 4th student? You will say what? Age of 3. 4th student means age of 3. Why? Because age is starting with the 0. So 0 is the for first student, 1 is for second, and 2 is for third, and 3 is for 4th student. So 4th student will have this age. And what is the age over here? 23. You understand that, right, everyone? Now the problem of array is, listen about that. Not problem, rather the feature of array is that it has to be in continuous memory allocation. So if one integer is occupying 4 bytes in memory, I'm telling you something important to you. So if I say this is the 100 is the address of first element, what will be the address of second element if occupying 4 bytes? 104. And what will be the address of the next one? 108. You understand what I'm saying? I'm talking about the physical addresses of array. And just a little question. Let's see how many of you know. If you don't know, no problem, because we are going to do collections, and I'll tell you that also in complete detail. But how many of you know what is linked list? Linked list. Let's see who can just tell me what is linked list. If you have studied the data structure before. Linked list I'm talking about. How many of you know what is linked list? You can write a yes or no. You can write a yes or no. Okay, you know, little bit. Yes, that's good. No, partially. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. So there is a mix of the people. Okay. 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 So that's good. That's now I just get the idea. Maybe there are like odd 30-40% people who know about that, or maybe more than that. Anyhow, can any one of you who have said yes to the linked list, can any one of you use again the annotate feature and make the linked list representation of this data 2019, 25, 23, 19, and 21? Baldeep, can you do that? I think Baldeep also said yes. Yes, Baldeep, can you do that? It would be good if you can just do that. The diagrammatic representation of linked list of this same data. Okay, just don't take all the data. Maybe just take out maybe three values: 20, 19, and 25. Make a linked list of that one. How do we represent linked list? I just want you to just discuss that, and I will. Okay, Baldeep is trying, and someone else is also trying to do that. 20. That's good. That's good. Good. Right. 19. That's very good. So only take three values, right? Okay, these are called nodes. Thank you. Thank you, Baldeep. Thank you very much. And the last node. Okay, Manpreet is trying to draw a more organized diagram, right? No problems, Manpreet. You can just try it out. That's good. Okay, that's good. Baldeep, thank you very much. Right. So Manpreet is trying very nice diagram, and Manpreet. So again, Baldeep has drawn from the hand drawing, and Manpreet is using, of course, the main, the already made pictures. That's good. Manpreet, I'll let you complete that, because you have done a very good job. So I'll let you complete that. 19 and 25. That's good. Now connect them, Manpreet. Right, connected them. Yes, exactly. I'll talk about that. Yes, you are saying right. The last comment, linked list basically stores point and next node address. Yes, I'll just tell you that. But let me. Someone, please, are you done with that? If you are done, I can just remove that. We have done a very good job. Should I remove that? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Manpreet. Okay. So now let's clear that. And of course, you people have done a very good, excellent job. I'll just tell you a little changing, and someone has already mentioned that. Linked list is something like that. My drawing is also not good. Bear with my drawing. It has something like this. And by the way, this is not off topic. This is something we'll be using collection. Then we'll talk about vectors and all those things. So you will know that about that. Okay. And then what happens is that every node points to the next. Right. And what was the data? I don't remember. I'm just putting any data, randomly. I don't remember 25 or 20 or 20. I don't remember 21. Right. What should I write? Nothing over here. And there must be some starting point of this as well. Okay. For those who are new here, don't worry about that. And as I said, just understand the concept. I drew array as well over here. In diagrammatically, I drew an array as well. I drew array something like this, or three values. Let's talk about the three values so that life becomes easy. These three values in array will be like this. And this will be again 19, 25, and 21 again. So now listen about that. An array has supposed to be in continuous memory locations. What does that mean? If first element is starting at 100 point, and as I said, it occupies 4 bytes, so next element should be at 105. Next element should be at 108, and so on. Right? But when you talk about linked list has a very interesting feature that one of the node can reside anywhere in the memory, and the second node can reside anywhere in the memory, and third node can reside anywhere else in the memory. What does that mean? It means that this is somewhere in the memory, but it will just keep the address of its next node. Next node is what? These are called nodes in that. So it contains the data part, and it also contains the pointer part. This is called pointer or the reference or the address. right? Pointer or the reference, those who are familiar with the pointer. So every node has its own data and it has a pointer towards next one. Every node has its own data and the pointer to the next one. Every node has its own data and where it is pointing? Nowhere. Why? Because it is the last bogie of the train, right? So last bogie does not connect to anyone. So this is the first, engine maybe, or the first bogie, and the second one, the third one. So this is ending of node. Yes. So the problem, or why I was discussing that, in good old days, like in these days, we do not have this problem of an memory allocation, and we have got so much memory. But the problem is, just remember that arrays problem, first problems of array is that it occupies continuous memory. So if there are no 4 plus 4 plus 4, 12 bytes in memory, if there are no 12 bytes continuously empty, if they are not available, array would not be created, which is not the problem right now in these days. I'm just telling you the classical problem, a problem that used to happen. Number one. Number two is that array's size, which I'll talk about. Array's size has to be defined at the compilation time, and be it you store any values or not, this is the size of array. By the way, I'm telling you, and I'll let you know. So size of array is 5. So if I just store 3 values, these two have no values, but still this memory will be occupied. So to solve all these problems, we use what? Rather than using this one, we use linked list. And linked list is that data structure that solve over this problem. I'm talking to those now new people. Do you get a slight idea of linked list? I don't want you to be an expert of that, but you should have. Now you can say that I've heard about linked list, and linked list is something like that, which has nodes, and every node has the address of the next node. I'm talking to those new who are looking for the linked list for the first time, who said no to the linked list. Understand, everyone? Okay, that's very good. Thank you very much for responding. Sarita, thank you very much. I need maybe 1 or 2 more responses so that I understand, because there was few people who were saying no, that I don't understand, and you did not hear about it. But again, at least now you have some familiarity with that. That's very good. So there are lots of people who are now. So now array. So in C# also we can use arrays. And what is that arrays? Or maybe what is this one? The data type, the name of the variable, and the assigning of value or whatever. In the same way, how do we create this one in our C# program? It will just tell us, if I write int this, it means I want to create an array data type. Everyone understands? This is the name of the array which I will use. And in C#, you need to create what? You use new keyword, and here you will tell new what I want, integer new, like allocate the memory for that one, int, and how many elements I want? I want elements, 5 elements over. Now, by the way, this new keyword is used for memory allocation in object oriented world. You must be familiar with this new. If you are not, I can tell you, I'll discuss that new today. No worries. So new is used for. So this is the syntax of defining an array of any size in our C# program. We have defined an array. Everyone gets that? And to mention or to use every value, what we do is my numbers of 0. As I said, the first location is 0th location. Second location is 1 location, 2, 3, 4, and you know that. And now let's move forward, and let me show you the other slide so that. So first element is indexed at, observe, first element is indexed as 0, always 0. Therefore, the last element's index is size minus 1. So remember that if you say there is a 5 elements, so the last index will be 5 minus 1. Size is 5, 5 minus 1, 4 is the last index. Right? So this is so index out of range exception on overflowing. I'll tell you that I'll run your program and I'll show you a simple example. I've just run that, and I'll show you this example, and then you will understand what is going on. So far, so good. Everyone understands that? I have just, I'll just stop over here for a break, little quick break, and then we'll just talk about the rest of the things. Everyone good with it till now? You have heard about the linked list today. You have heard about few different things, and now we'll just talk about this array in detail, and also we'll talk about the methods and few things in our after the break. So let's take a 10 minutes break. It's 2:04 in my clock. I will be back at 2:14 sharp. Kind of you. Thank you. I would like to thank you. Yes, the 2 people have just mentioned that. So right now we are recording, and I'll just let you know what we have done. So 300 is coming as output. So you see what we have done. We are just trying to create that array because we were just discussing the array towards the end. So index out of bound, I'll just let you know what is this index out of bound. Now you know that we have created an array of 3 values, right? What if I want to do something like this? Equal to 400, for example, whatever. Now I'm doing something wrong, something bad. And what is that bad? I am trying to store at a location which is not a valid location. You remember we have talked about that the last index should be always size minus 1. The size is 3. So 3 minus 1, it means we have the last index should be equal to 2, not 3, right? It should not be a 3. So it has to be a last index should be equal to 2. But I'm using that one. So now you know if you just build your solution, not running it, so it might say that it is successful. Maybe it says that build one succeeded, build is succeeded. But now what if I run it? Something bad. And what is that? Index out of range exception. Now, this is one error that you will get if you try to go beyond your array. It will give you index out of range exception. Those who have studied C language, I'm talking about a classical C language, that in C language, there is no bound checking. C is so, kind to everyone that you keep on just storing something and it will keep on accepting the values. And at times it will be giving back the values also in the appropriate way, right? But of course, C++ has this automatic, method of finding out that if you are going out of the range, it will just point you out that don't go out of the range. Are you getting that? It means that I'm doing something bad. So that's why runtime error has occurred. Okay, I don't want this because this is not the right thing. I'm going out of index bound. Now, this was for the storing. And how about for the printing? If I say for the printing, and again, as I said, build will not do anything bad with it because we are just, building that one. It says it's okay. But when you go to the runtime, of course, when you will just do it at runtime. So at runtime, it will just throw this exception, which is an unhandled exception. We usually try to handle those exceptions. Index out of range exception. I think those Java people can just maybe, I think it's array index out of bound exception in Java. Can anyone tell me those Java people? Yes, array index out of bound. So here it says system.index out of range. So in Java, it usually gives array index out of bound exception. And I think in C++ also. I don't remember. Anyhow, so please, this is basically what we are going out of the range. So no, never go out of the range. Whatever you have defined, you have to just use that. So this is I've just used. Okay. So now, of course, this was not the right way of doing that. Rather, what we want to do is, of course, we want to have a for loop that does it for us. So how can you do that? And this is quite easy. If I do that, I++, and if I just make a body and I say my numbers of I equal to I plus 1, right? I plus 1. So I've just, mentioned that every my number should store some one value, maybe I plus 1 value or something value. So now I've stored that. And if I want to print all of them, of course, that I again need a loop. I can run it with I as well because that I is specifically for that loop. But anyhow, I'm just using a J. So just cut and paste here. And not of I, rather, sorry, J here. So now you see here that what I've done, I've just, saved values, some automatic values over there. And now I am just, printing them out. So this is, again, of course, this will be the right way of doing things that you need to, you have to have follow. Okay, so the thing I was telling you, which I had to repeat, and I'll tell you that. So, if I do something like this, if I less than, if I do it, I less than or equal to. Now, anyone with all discussion that we have done, those new people, what will happen if I run this program? What will happen if I run this program? Anyone in the chat window? What type of error? So can you just come to like for everyone message, because you are sending me direct messages. Looks like it's yes, index out of range exception should occur. Array index out of range. And why out of range? Of course, we are going out of range because less than equal to 3 means it will run for 0, 1, 2, and 3 as well, which should not be the case. It has to go till 3. So now if I run that one, of course, you see that something bad will happen, of course, and it will say that you are going out of bound. This is out of range, right? So now let's talk about something. This is good thing about for each loop, that, for example, if you are talking about, we can just talk about that as well. If you just talk about that this was an array, I don't know how many values were there, but if I use, for example, I just use another example, and I'm using this my previous example so that we can. So if I can use, of course, if I want to print that, we can use that for loop, and then we can use the for each loop. So now what for each will do? I say int I in my numbers, right? So console.writeLine and just print an I, right? I am not concerned with how many values are there. No need for you to use for loop. For example, this array is coming from somewhere and I don't know the size of this array, and I want to just print that. So you see what happens. Now it is just printing out. Now, exactly. So now what happens if I just increase the size of it? For example, I don't know, I've just made it 5. And now what I do is that I just add 2 or 3 values over here. I just keep on adding the values. So if I just keep on adding the values, again, of course, I'm just doing this by some other methods. I'm taking input from user or somewhere. So what I do is that I just keep on adding the values, 4, and I say 500, whatever. And now if I run that, I don't need to change this loop. Why? Because this loop does not depend upon any of the bonding values. It will just produce the result. 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Right, everyone? Everyone got that? So this is basically about the arrays, and we'll talk about arrays more in detail when we'll be talking about the other collections and things like that. So for the timing, so for each is clear to everyone, because I was just trying to repeat this for each for you. For each is a very simple loop, and it does a very, very interesting job for us. As I said in the beginning of our lecture, that for each is used, this one. So for each is used, and where we don't know how many values. So again, here we are considering that we don't know how many numbers are there in my numbers, and I have to just print those values. So I always take help from the for each. I will never go for the for loop. Right? So this is one way of printing that, one way of finding it out. So as I said, as I mentioned here, sweet and simple. This is very sweet and simple. What you do is for int a in my numbers, you just go and print that a. So what happens? What is happening typically? This I, every I, for example, for this my numbers, this collection contains 5 values right now. So my numbers 0 is 100, 1 is 200, whatever. So this I will iterate through all the values. The first value will come in I print it out. Second value, third value, fourth value, fifth value. Now here is something that I want you people to understand. You know that we have 2 ways of accessing, like using something. We can make a body of it, or we don't make it a body. For each body or for loop body or anything. Do you see that here I am running with this one? So I'm getting the same output, or if I just don't use it. Can anyone tell me why it is happening? That without body also it is working fine for me. So please remember, I think you people might know that if you have to use only one statement with any for loop or any statement, yes, it only works for one line, not more than one line. For example, I want to have something like this output. So I can just mention it over here. Console.writeLine, and I want to have an asterisk after every input. For example, after every input, I want to have this asterisk. For example, you see it has itself, settled it up, and it shows that it is not part of the body of it. But I want to make it about. So if I run that, you will see that all numbers will be printed, and then asterisk will be printed. No, I want to have print asterisk every after. So for what I'll do is something like this. I'll make a body of it. Why? Because now I need to run these both together. So you see, now I've made the body, and even if now they are not offsetting or looks like they are not part of it, but of course now after every value, yes. So every value you'll see asterisk. Of course, now it has become Now it has become what? It has become a group of statements. And if I take this one out, and even though if it is not doing that one, still it will always work for the first line. First line means whatever line it will first introduce. So first line is 100, like, the first line is, it is being, encountering is this right line. So it is just mentioning that. And once it is all done, it is just mentioning it. And if I just place it over there, that it would be just, looking like. So if there is one line only, you should not, or you are not allowed to use the curly braces, right? So can you use any increment decrement operator with for each loop? Yes, that's a very good question, and let me answer that. And I'm very happy about this. You are talking about for each. So what for each, the problem is that for each iterates through each and every value. So that facility is not available in for each loop. And for that, again, let me just tell you an interesting thing. For that, you can do that with for. Of course, you might know that. And if I say, if I less than equal to, for example, let's run it for this loop, I plus plus. Now you see here. So what you say, that you can use any increment decrement? No, because it will iterate through all the values of that particular collection that you are using with. But here, what we can do, I can do something like this: I is equal to I plus 2. Now, if I do something like that, you see what will happen. My numbers and 0. So what will be the output? Of course, you people might guess it, and I'll comment this out so that you see that what is going on. So, yes, we can. Okay, thank you. I would have known this, that when we just run this program. Yes, I should be good. So you see here. So you see here, now it is showing what? The first value and the third value and the last value. Why? Because this is incrementing by 2. But now again, in for each, we usually do not have that facility, and for each loop will iterate through every value. If I just make it I have to uncomment it. So now if you see that it will be iterating through all the values, right? So, but that facility is over there. Now, if you see here, there are two statements, break and continue. We have talked about break in the last class, when we were talking about the switch statement. But break and continue, mind you, is not only for the switch statements. You can use them at the different places as well. For example, if I just take this example again, right, and now make it normal. So if it is normal, it means that it will print all 5 values. Oh, keep on printing it. Why? Oh, I is equal to I plus plus. I'm sorry. So I plus plus only, right? So I is equal to I plus plus will keep on running it forever. So it will just print all 5 values. Let me just have 5 more values. Again, let's take a, and we'll see the difference between this one. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, how many is that? It has become 9. Oh, sorry. Right. My number of 9 equal to anything. So we are not concerned with the values right now. We are concerned with the the arrays here. So there are 10 values, and 10 values have been given this value. So if I run this one, of course it should. Oh, okay. Loop is not changed. So now I'll have to change the loop as well. So change this loop and run this one. So you see here 120. Now let's talk about something interesting. And what is that interesting? For example, it is printing all those values. What I say is, if I becomes 5, if I equals 5, break. Understand, everyone? When I becomes 5, you break out of this loop. So break is used to take you out from a particular block. If you want to just jump out of a particular block, you will use this break. Now run this one. You see that only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values have been printed. And why it is printing 6? starting from 0. So 0 till it is going for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it going right, or it should print 0? So it will start from 0. So for the 0 value, this will print it out. For 1 value, print it out. 2. For 3, it will print out. 4. For 5. Okay. So for 5 as well, it will just print that out, and then it will check that if it is equal to 5, it will just break out of it. Right? So what I can do is I can just take out this one, because logically looks like to me that for the 5 value, it should not print. Maybe I don't want it to print for the 5 value. So just run that post increment. Okay, so you see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now what is happening? For every value, it first checks the value of 5. First value I is equal to 0, so it will just go there. 1, 2, 3, 4. But when it reaches to 5, of course, like a of 5, my numbers of 5, it has to reach, so it will just break out from it. Right? Now let's talk about continue over here. If I use continue, can anyone tell me what will happen now? Anyone in the chat window, what will happen now if I use continue word? Okay, it will skip a 5th value. That's good. That's good. Let's see that. Okay, so let's talk about what are the values and what it is showing. So 100 is 100, 200 is 200, 300 is 300, 400 is 400, and 500 is 500. And then 200 is missing over here. Can you see that 200 is missing? And why it is missing? It is missing the 5th value. So what continue does, whenever it reaches to a particular value, and I say continue means don't go to this statement, go back and start your loop. Everyone understands that what I'm saying? How many of you understand? What does that mean? So when reaches 5, yes, the value gets skipped. Now, if I say something like that, you can just understand what is going on. If I remainder 2 equals 1, continue. What does that mean? I remainder 2. All of you are familiar with this remainder operator? Yes. Baldeep is saying yes. Rest everyone? Yes, exactly. So what we are saying that whenever the odd number comes, you do not print that, skip out of that. Right? So now let's run that one. Now I'm going a bit fast again, considering that you people are giving me the feedback, but you have to just, if you are not understanding, you need to know. So 100 is printed out. Why? Because 0 does not matches it over here. But if you talk about when we have 1 remainder 2 equals 1, 1 remainder 2 equals 1 is the right condition. And if it is the right condition, it will skip that out. So you see 200 has been skipped. I hope you are able to see that completely. So 200 is skipped. Now, when it reaches I becomes 2. When it reaches 2, I remainder 2 equals 1. Like 2 remainder 2. 2 and remainder 2 is not equal to 1. Rather, it is equal to 0. So if it is 0, it will just skip skip that out or continue, and it will go back to the loop. And then comes what? The next value 3. 3 remainder 2 is equal to 1. Yes, condition is true. If it is true, again, skip that out. So it will just skip all those values which are over there, and it will only print. So these are the odd number. So it will check for the odd indices, and it will just print out the odd indices. And what I can do over here is that number of 0. And what we can do is that we can just print the index 0 and value 1. Right? So let's print that one as well, so that we know what is going on. So index 0, I mean I, and then, so now it will show both of the values to us. Let's see that. What's going on? Is there a problem? Okay, so see here. So it has just skipped out all those odd indexes. So if you see, the index 0 value is printing is 100. Index 1 is missing. Why? Because the condition was true over here. And if it is true, continue. So for the next value, condition was not true, and for the next value, all those values whose conditions was matching, it is just printing them out. And if I just reverse that, equals to 0, if I do that 0, then what happens? Let's see. So now it is showing the odd indexes, right? Odd indexes it is showing, and it is skipping out the even indexes. I would like to have feedback here, because I would now. So continue and break. You understand? So continue you will use whenever. So that might be helpful for you when you are just creating those, nesting loop practice and things like that. You might need sometimes you need continue, that you don't want to print something and you want to go back to over there. Maybe sometimes spaces, maybe sometimes some other thing. So I need feedback from everyone before moving to the next topic. So this is break and continue, and I'll just because the next topic is another interesting one. Okay, I just mentioned one enum. So some people were having problem in enum as well. So for enum, I will just give a quick teaser, and then I will discuss it when we'll discuss classes and objects. I'll discuss that in very detail. It's strongly typed constants. First of all, I don't know we discussed that definition or not. Strongly typed constants they are called, and more details after we discuss classes and objects. As I said, I'm just giving a teaser introduction. Some people have asked about enum, and I will be very clear in enum when we know what are classes, what are objects, and then we just introduce enum over there. But one thing that you remember is that it's a strongly typed constant, and what we talked about yesterday also, you might have just practiced on that. So again, a teaser introduction of enum again, and this enum will be discussed in more details when we have classes and objects, everything discussed. Might be in coming week, next week, or the week after. All right, so now comes another point. Charge is going down. Right, so methods. This is very important, and this might help you in your maybe in your assignment as well, and in your previous work as well. We are talking about the methods, also called functions. Write ones, use as many times as you want. You know about functions, and we have all seen that all C language programs have at least one function. And what is a C++ program? Sorry, C# program. And what is that? Which is main method. You remember? We have talked about this main method. Now today we will talk about the different methods as well, because there are different types of methods that we have. One of them is called static methods, and one of them is called instance methods. So we'll talk about them, static and instance methods. So first of all, let's go back to our environment and try to do something. Or maybe I'll just place this one as well. So maybe I'll copy this one. So this is or maybe cut that. I've just cut that one. So now what are methods? Method is something interesting. So this is one method that we are using, the main method that we have right now. We are working in main method. So after the end of main method, I want to define my own method, right? I'm outside of main method. Now I'm not working in main method right now anymore, right? So if you want to define your own method, you will need to use, first of all, public keyword, right? And intentionally, I'm just missing out a static void keyword, and maybe my arrays. I'm calling this function as my method as my arrays. Right? I'm defining a method, public void my arrays. Everyone understands that? I'm just defining a method my arrays. So I am not inside main function, main method. Please remember that. I'm outside of main method. Please remember. Let me just, okay, just hold on a minute, or maybe just keep it that way, because I'll share this file again with you. So now my arrays, I'm outside of main method. This is the end of main method. Let me tell you, end of main method, so that you are very clear what is going on. My arrays, this is a method that does something. So what I'm doing is that, I just copied and pasted that code because I want to have something in my method. So this is one method that defines an arrays of 10 values and prints out those arrays in the values, and just, it just shows us skipping and all those things, right? So now what we are doing is that we have defined this method. Now I want to use this method in main function. You consider there is nothing in my main function. Please bear in mind, there is nothing in my main function, by the way, right? So now what I can do is that I can call this method my array over here. And those who are familiar with the programming, they remember that they used to do something like this, my arrays, and they can just call this method. But that's not the case over here. Can anyone who are experienced people tell me why I'm not able to call this function, call this method over here? Can anyone tell me? Those who are having prior experience. Because for that, I think you need to have Okay, it's not static. That's very good. Anyone else? That's a good answer. And that is the right answer. Anyone? Why it is not accessing that one? So remember, that's very good. One of them. Okay. Yes, exactly. This needs an object. So now I'll tell you. When a method has been defined without a static keyword, I've not used a static keyword. Intentionally, I've not used that static keyword. So you saw that it has gone corrected. But right now, I say that I'm not. So I'm intentionally not defining it. Intentionally not defining a static keyword. So when you define a method without a static keyword, you know that this method has become the part of a class. And what is that class? Class called is program. We are working in a class. So we are gradually moving towards object-oriented world. Whenever we work in our C# program, C# files, we have an automatic default class that is created, and that class is called program class. And how we can create our own classes, we'll talk about that in object-oriented, as I said, in our object-oriented part of the course. But right now, we are saying that when we create a new program and a new project, we have a class automatically created. And you see that this main method is also coming in this class. If I just minimize it, this is the main method. And this is another method that I have. So it has two methods. Main method is also there in the class. And there is this method also in that class. But why? Because I have not used the static one. This method typically is called, if I call it, this method is typically called as instance method. What does that mean? It is an instance method of this program class. Everyone understands that? Because, of course, it's not created inside main, it's created alongside main. So it is created inside this program class. So that's why we'll say that this method is not a static method, or it's not an independent method. It's a method that needs to have its class first called if you want to call this method. Make sense to everyone? A little sense. This my arrays, just understand, my arrays is this, since it is not static, it's an instance method. An instance of what? It's an instance method of program class. Right? It's an instance method of program class. People understanding? Those who are new, other than those who replied to my last question, because they knew that object required or something. So this my arrays is not an independent method. It's a method defined inside program class. Does that make sense to everyone? There is a class program, and the method created is not an independent method. It's a part of program class. Does that make sense to everyone? I need response from the new people. That's good. That's good. Thank you, Deep. You always reply. And other new people who are of course learning for the first time this concept. Okay, good. So since it is the part of this program class, if I want to access this method, I'll have to do something special. Rather than calling it this way, I'll have to create an object of program class. Program obj program. Let's call it obj program. Object of program class. There is something called an object of a class. So just right now consider class is a big template, and object is a usable form of the class. We use object to call or to use those classes. Right now, just consider that. So how to create the method to the object? We say new, and we'll use program. This is a method of creating an object of a class. So program is a class name. This is object name, new keyword, and class name again. And those who are familiar, this is not class name. I will talk about that. This is called constructor, but don't worry about that. Just consider that this is the way of making objects. How to make objects in C++, in C#. Right? To create objects in C#, we use this method. Class name, please bear in mind, and I'll annotate that so that everyone understands that. So first of all, we have what? Class name. Then we have object name. Then we have equal to, and then new, and then what I'm saying is class name again. Right? Let me just make it up. Okay, there is some question. I'll take that. In C# or all methods by default public internal in nature. Yes. So by default they are like not by default. That's why you are just by default automatically you are mentioning it over here that this has to be public. If I just take this out, public out, you can just know that, how do you know that? You will just, you see that what happens. I have annotate open. So if I just take it out and I try to just create, this method, or I want to just access this method. Let's see. Now, first of all, let me just complete that. I'll come to your question again back. So first of all, let me complete that, and then I'll come back to your question and discuss that completely. So now we have got this program class, and we have got this method over here, and I think I just made something bad with it. Right. So now what I'm doing is that I have just created object. Now what I could do, I can do obj program dot, yes, what is dot? My arrays. My arrays method is there. I can call this method, and by mistake I have just deleted everything from this one. I don't know why and how I did that. Okay, thankfully I have got that one. So let's see this error. This is my arrays. This is class program, and one more for the namespace. Okay. So now I can call this function. So please see here. I'll come to your question. That's the question that you have asked. So if you see here, program obj program equal to new program, obj program dot my arrays. So now this object can be used to call any methods that are inside this program class. Again, that would make a slight of the sense right now, but just understand that we have created object of program class. We have called object of program, obj program equal to new program. Again, as I said, the class name again comes over here, and then I used obj program dot my arrays, and now this method will be called over here. Just let me run that. So now this is printing something. Now, for those no people I'm talking to, do you understand that this is not the print? This is not something we are printing in the main now. Where this output is coming from? Deep, can you answer that? Where this output is coming from? If you see the code over here, this output is not coming from the main directly right now. Rather, it is coming from, yes, anyone? Yes, this output is not another class. You can say it is coming from my arrays method, my arrays function. Yes, it's coming from another method, right? It's coming from another method. You are right. Now this is again question to you. If I just take out this statement, will I still get this output? Deep, will I still get this output or no? No output. Why is there no output? Yes, of course, right. But why there is no output? Because you have not called the method. You have created the object, but unless you call something, you'll not be able to run that one. Make sense? So I need to explicitly call that function that I've created, obj program dot, right, my arrays. I've called this obj program arrays. Now, if I have called that, now it will be accessed. It will be called over here. Right now, let me make your life simple for some time. I'm just making it comment. If I had defined this method as static, now it is no more an instance method, rather it is a static method. Static is a keyword that's very, very, very ultra important, and I would like to emphasize a bit more in static later on in the classes as well, but I want you to understand a very important concept of static. Public static void my arrays. If you have defined this static keyword, you don't need to create the object of the class, rather you can directly call this function, directly call this method. You understand that? Okay, just for the time being, let's make uncomment. Let's make it comment. You see here, what does it say? It says class. So what does it say? It says that, yes, exactly, you are right. That is also the right way. I'll tell you. This is one of the way that now obj program dot my arrays is not recognized. Why? Because my arrays, the method that you have created, is a static method, and it does not require this object name. Rather, what it requires is, as someone has also mentioned, rather what it requires is, it requires either you can call it like this or you can call it something like this, as someone has mentioned, program.myparents. Now, a very important concept to remember. I would like you people to remember that, please. The concept is that static methods of a class can be called without creating objects, and non-static methods, instance methods, cannot be called without creating the objects of the class. Does that make sense to everyone? I'm just writing it over here, and I want you people to just remember that static methods can be called without creating objects, while as non-static, or I can call it instance methods, right? Instance methods can not be called without creating objects. Are you people making sense of it? I'm talking to those who are new here. Again, here what we have done, here what is the difference between these two lines, 150, 151 and 154? What is the difference? Here we had to create the object and then call the function. Why? Because the function was what? Was not a static function. So if function is a non-static function, an instance function, you need to create object of that class and then call this through object. But if you have defined a function as a static function, a static method, you can call this by directly by using this class name. And I even called it without this class name. I'll let you know why does that happen. So can anyone answer me that again? But again, I'll just discuss that this is also possible, that you can use it even without the class. It will be accessed. It will run. Let me show you that it will run or not. Hopefully, if I've not done any other mistake. You see, it is coming over here. So by the way, please bear in mind, a static method can be called without creating object. That static method you can call by the name of class as well. So you see here, program.myarrays. Class name is program. Mind you, the class name is what? The program. So the program.myarrays, or you can just call it something like that. Everyone understands that? Let's try to create other methods, and just for the practice purpose, and just I want to tell you people that how you will access that function. So now if I create another function, public void, let's call a function maybe my function, whatever, my function. And again, I'm just creating a simple function that we have already talked about. Public void main function, my function. And this my function does what? Console.writeLine, and it says I am a non-static function. I'm a non-static function, right? So I've just created a my function. Now, can you people, I'm talking to those people who are here for the first time, can you tell me how can I call this function now? Of course, you know the method. So how I can call this function now? I'll have to, for calling this function, of course, I need to first of all create object of this class. And now if you see here, I hope you people can make sense of it. So obj program, now when I use obj program and I'll do dot, so will I find my function over there in the definition as well? Yes, my function. So I'll say my function, and I'll just, do that, something like that. Right? So on that issue, someone was talking about that if we have not used this public, what will happen? Like, I've not used this public word and I've created my function. Right? Now let's run that one. So what do you see? Is that function called automatically? So what does that tell us? That yes, by default, this function is being created public. And why we are using this public? You know that there are there are multiple the specifications of on all the methods. the one is public and one is private and all this. So again, we'll talk about this public private, and again when we'll be just talking about the access specification. But right now, yes, it is by default, it is treating as a public function. So if you use it a public or not, it will just specify that public. But again, we usually use that public keyword with our functions, but if you don't use that, that is also possible. Right, everyone is clear about that one? Right, that's good. So people are now clear. So let's go back to the slides first, and then let's talk about few more things. So we have just talked about this, how to create instance and static methods. Parameters. This is another very important part of our method. So if I create a method with a parameter, let me just make it smaller, and that make it smaller as well. Now I'm creating another method. So I'm creating a method. First of all, I will try to create a static method so that I'm not required to just use all those things. Void, and let's call a function square, which will just square a number. So if I give it a number, for example, it will accept an integer a, whatever, right? And what it does is no, not returning. What it does is it just prints out, not return, because I'll talk about the return in greater detail. So it says the value is 0 and the square is 1. So the value is a that is received, and the square is a into a, right? Now I've defined this function. I want to use this function in my program. So again, since I've defined this as a static function, so I can call it by using the class name. So I'll say program dot. Yes, if you see that, do you find a square function? Yes, a square function. But now this is square function, if I call it like this, you see what it says? It says that it requires a parameter. So whatever you pass to the function is called the parameter of that. So if I pass it 5, for example, just for the understand. So I'm passing it 5, and now let's call it. And now let's make them comment so that we can see only this one. Jaswinder, you want to say something? Because you are unmuted. I think by mistake it's like. Okay, so the value is 5 and the square is 25. So it is doing what? It is accepting one value and just just printing out that the square of that value. So whatever value you pass it on, you'll get the square of that value. So of course that is a very simple function, just accepting a value and printing the square. So please remember one thing, very important. There is something called a return type. So this is called the parameter, that the parameter that function accepts. And you remember in the beginning we talked about that the main function has different implementations, different signatures, so to speak. And one of the signatures is that it accepts strings when we run it, and we can just leave that out as well. So main has different formats that we can use. So in the same way, when you are creating a method, you can create a method that does not accept anything, like this function, my function, and you can create a function that returns that accepts a parameter and returns nothing. So this void, you remember, this void tells that it won't return anything. I hope you remember that discussion I've given, I think in my first video lecture that I shared with you, that this void represents the return type and this represents the parameters. Does everyone remember that? This returns a parameter, this returns a return type. This method's return, its return type. Now, if I just go there, yes, people remember that. Now, if I just go there and I try to make something different, and if I do something like this, if I say int, it means now this function, this method will return one integer value. Got everyone? And rather than now printing this over here, I'll say if it is returning, we'll have to use the return keyword. Return a into a. Now return a value. Right? I've defined this square. Now, if you come over here, now because this function is returning a value, so I need to now if I just call this function like this, let's see what happens. So nothing comes out. And why nothing comes out? Anyone? Why it is not printing? Because it was not printing anything. And why it is not showing anything over here? Because it is returning a value that I have not caught anywhere. And if I need to catch that, I will say int whatever b equal to. Now I can print that int b as well, or I can just do something like that as well. I can just print this b, right? So now run that one. You see, it is now showing the 100. Why? Because 10 was passed. So if I passed again, if I pass it maybe whatever 7, so now it will show me the result of that one. And now everything is being done over here. Because I would like to tell you people something interesting about the functions now, method. So 7 is 49. So now this method, this square method, now it is returning a value as well. And if it is returning, you can do something like this as well, or you can do something like this as well. I hope everyone knows that. Program dot square, and you can pass a value over here. So that this is, of course, this while it is returning, so some value will come over here, and right line will just print that value, or maybe you can just concatenate that in a string as well. The square of 0 is 1, right? So close that one, and what I see is, for example, because I'm right now passing a value and I know what value I'm passing on. So I say the square of 8 is whatever, 64. I'm passing that 8 or whatever. So square of 8 is 64, or whatever you pass the value of, and of course you will be just passing that value over here and over here. And sometimes you can just take input from the user. So whatever you are passing, you will be passing in both ways, the parameter and like that. Right. Okay, so now this is a function that will accept one integer and that will return one integer. Right. I want to discuss something more related to that, and then I might be just winding it up for today, because there are lots of things that we have already discussed. Now see here, when I pass this value from here, for example, from this method, let me just make another shape of it, so that I have this something like this I, and I say, for example, I is equal to 2, and here I use this I. Square of I. I want to tell you something very interesting. I is equal to 2. So now I'm passing I. So now it's very easy. I can just give it any value, and that value will be passed, and its square will be printed. So if you see, if I can do 25, now it will show the square of 25 over here. The square of 25 is 625. Everyone understand that? Now what if I, of course, there is if you see that when I pass a value from here, when I pass this I from here, this I value goes, let me just take my annotate. This I value, which is 25 right now, this 25 goes from this body of the function, sorry, body of main, it goes over here. Now here we have defined an A. So this 25 gets stored in what? This 25 gets stored in A. Understand, everyone? This 25 is stored in A. Now return A into A. For example, here I have not used this return statement, rather I've used this one. A is equal to A multiplied by A. So I've just updated A, and I want to send this A only. So now here in this step, this A value will become whatever. If 25 is coming 625, this will become 625, and A is returned. So A is returned, 625 comes over here against all this, and this is printed over here. Everyone understand that? I need response, maybe. You understand that whenever we send a value, that value go over here and it is stored in this variable, and this variable remains over here because this is not a variable that I can recognize. So a question that will make more sense to you people, of course, that should make more sense to you people. Can I write here A? Can I write here the value of A? The A which was defined over here, because this is a very generic concept, and I want you people to just remember that and understand that, because this is an important concept. So can I write a value of A over here? No. And why no? Because A is the local variable for this method, and we don't know this A. Can I see this A's update over here? No. Why? Because the way I'm calling this function method is called calling a method by providing it value. We are passing the value. I never goes from here. Okay, if I ask you, can I access this I over here? I is equal to I plus I equal to, it's automatically doing this. I is equal to I plus 10. Can I recognize this I over here? Of course, no. And why no? Because this I is basically, again, no. Yes, you are right. So this I cannot be accessed. Why? Because I does not come, rather 25 comes, rather the value comes over here. Right? So I cannot access this A. But is there a way through which I can see, or maybe I can update this I? This is the interesting part. I want to update this I. So whatever has gone, the square root should be updated this I. So you know the I value does not change over here. If I just print it over here as only I, okay, you say make it global. That's good. So if I printed I over here in the next line, you know, I will have no change because I has no, because I was not passed to that. It was only passed. Okay, that's good. You say that declare it in access of the class. So you see, I is still 25. Now I'm telling you another very interesting way of doing that. What is that way? Rather than using this int A, you come here and, for example, you say, or maybe let me just change the definition of this one to make you people understand. I'm just making it again void. It's not returning anything, right? It's not returning anything. And if it is not returning anything, let me just, you know, call that function program dot square, and I'm passing I over here, right? So now I've just done something interesting. What I'm doing is that I'm just saying I is equal to, sorry, A equal to, or rather we can just keep it A is equal to A into A, right? I'm passing a value, and that value is coming over here. Of course, the value comes into A gets changed, I does not get changed. Now, if I want to do something like that, everyone understands what I'm saying? Because I've just taken out the return value right now. I don't want to return anything from this, right? So now if I just take out this one and I want to, I'll just cut it, and it will be here, but again, let's put somewhere here. So now you see here, I does not get changed. Now, if I want to do that, I have another way of doing it. Go and write down ref over here. Reference. Is that right? And also do something like this. Ref of I. When calling, you just do that. I'll show you in my slides. I've done that. So return type, you have to understand passing by value and passing by reference. So whenever we are passing a value and the value is coming back, nothing is coming back, it is basically passing by value. Now we are just doing something like this, reference. Right? So we have passed that, and now run that. Now, is the value of I also changed, even though it was accepted in A? But is the value of I is also changed? I is coming up 625. How many of you understand what is going on? Then I'll discuss that again. But I wanted to give you a teaser program, and then we'll discuss about that. Yes, how many of you understand? That's good. That's good. You should understand that. Okay, okay. You understand what is going on? How I is changing? Okay, that's good. That's what I want to know, that how many people do not understand. That's very good of you. I'll let you know what is going on. Good. So I need response from, by the way, from everyone, so that I know that how many people have got it. Most of people are saying yes, of course, that's very good, and you know what's going on. But let's talk about one of the concept has come, like one of the students says no, not understood. Of course, some prior experience is not maybe not telling them. Got an idea, but not sure about ref call by reference. Yes, exactly. It's call by reference. You're right. Call by reference. We are passing, in what way? In C language, if you have worked, we used to have pointers over there. Here we are using this ref I to pass reference. I'll tell you, let you know. That's good. Anyone else? Only one student honestly has said that they do not understand. Maybe others have understood. If they have understood, they should write yes. If they are not, they should write no, whatever. But at least you should write something. Anyhow, let's discuss that. So this is called calling a function by Yes, exactly. Same memory location. Let me just draw that and you will understand the concept. In first case, when there was a value, you remember when there was no reference, I was something in here, I was defined over here, and I was stored 25. I stored 25 over here. So I was something here. I was a different memory location. And when we created here without reference, I'm talking about without ref, right? So when we created this A was another memory reference, right? So these two were the different memory reference. So when you pass 25, A received 25 and A was changed to 625. So the change happened at A. I does not know what has gone. I'm talking about without reference, right? Please bear in mind. I'm talking about there's no reference over here. I just remove this reference from here. Got everyone? Okay. What will be the output in this situation? 25. You know, in this situation, the output will be 25 for I, not 625. Now, this was the previous previous situation. Now, when I just do something like this, I define ref of I. So now I have got an I memory location. So I is referring to this memory location, right? This is the memory location I, which has 25. So I have basically passed the address to A. So A is over here. A has also started to point this location because of this reference, calling by reference. Now, if you are accessing this A by using this ref keyword and you make some changes in A, so it means you are making a change at that memory location. And if you are making that change at memory location, when you will again access I, you will always get 625, the updated value. Now you understood? Someone, Monarch, I think Monarch was saying. Monarch, you got the point? Reference means calling or maybe passing the address of the variable rather than the variable by itself. That's very good. You understand the concept. And in the beginning or in the middle of the class, we talked about, someone asked about the out parameter. I'll talk about out parameter, not today. I'll just try to, wind it up after some, as I said. So, but again, I'll just let you know about some interesting things. So now, this is calling a function by reference. So this is called a reference, or this is the example. So this is so when you are calling by reference, it's basically, so even though in my example, if you see here, it's creating a V, but V and I both are basically referring to the same location. So this is something that we used to do in our in our C language. We used to do this by using pointers, but here we can use this by using this reference keyword. Everyone got it? That's good. So I will be just, today I'll just keep till this point. Now I want you people, if you have not done so, you have to, like again, you do not have to submit the lab, this last lab, but if you people have done that, you can just show it to me if you want. You can just show that lab task. Is anyone who has completed the lab task from yesterday by using enum? Okay, why do we? So yes, so basically this is the syntax over here that we need to use this. So that way we are sending the address of it. So since if you have not studied C language, in C language we used to do something like this. Those who have studied C language, they understand we used to send something like this. Do you people remember? Those who have worked in C language, that to send an address, we use address operator over there. So for accessing the address over here, we don't have that keyword. Rather, we don't have that ampersand. Rather, we use this reference keyword, ref keyword, at the calling time. So calling time, we are providing it the address. Yes, we use pointers in C. So this reference is basically used over here in C++. You are right. We use pointers in C language, not C# or Java or anything. But here we have got this facility of ref over here. When I got the point? Yes, that's good. So now I am first of all pausing or stopping recording so that our